Good afternoon. I'm David Ruffin, Chair of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Welcome to fellow commissioners, staff members, and the general public to our March 23rd quarterly meeting. As is always the case, I do need to do two or three things that are a little more cumbersome in a virtual meeting. One is remind everyone that we have to take a roll call vote on every issue that comes before us by name, and have each commissioner to so identify, not just raising a hand. But before we go that route on any issue on the agenda, obviously I need to call the roll to determine that we do have indeed a quorum. Dr. Bryan.
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Condo.
Here.
Dr. Denard.
Here.
Commissioner Dixon.
Here.
Yes. Commissioner Groom.
Here.
Dr. Johnson.
Present.
Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
I know that Commissioner Reynolds notified me within the last couple of hours that he was at the last minute unable to attend today's meeting. We'll certainly miss him, but he will not be here. Commissioner Snowden. I know I've seen you. There we go. I think you went the exact opposite. There we go. Now you're unmuted. We're still having difficulty hearing you, Commissioner Snowden. No, cannot. It may be a matter of your laptop speaker in addition to the Zoom. There, sometimes the laptop speaker or computer speaker has to be activated in addition to the Zoom application speaker or voice icon. So hopefully we can work on that. Also is the tradition, of course, and requirement is that I need to ask all commissioners, having seen the published agenda for, I believe, the last 10 days, if there is indeed any conflict of interest relative to items that will be brought to the commission today per the agenda. Are there any conflicts of interest from voting commissioners?
No.
I hear none. Well, I do again want to welcome everyone to this quarterly meeting. I do want to take the chair's prerogative a bit to frankly wish the Deputy Secretary, Dr. Waters, some relief and some recovery from excruciating back pain that he's had. I've been in some communication with him, and he's a yeoman spirit to be even here today, given that anybody's experienced a back pain understands that can be debilitating. So again, Dr. Waters, we wish you the fastest possible relief and recovery.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you for soldiering on with us in not only today's meeting, but the preparation for it. Also, I'd like to, of course, ask is the typical performance to make sure we approve the minutes of the December 8th last quarterly meeting of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
I'll second it. Denard.
So moved by Doctors Bryan and Denard. Do I hear any discussion? Okay, let's vote on it. Acceptance of the minutes of the December 8th, 2021 meeting of the North Carolina Historical Commission. Dr. Bryan.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Condell.
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Snowden.
Yes.
Well, we hear you now. Multiple stereo here. And that's only one. That was only one vote, by the way. And David Ruffin approved as well. In the last meeting, we had an item that came before us relative to the house in the Horseshoe that was effectively tabled by the commission and sent back to staff for further work. I believe it would be appropriate at this time to recognize Michelle Lanier to bring to the commission any revisions or work that was done on that matter that basically required tabling in the previous meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Ruffin. I just want to also thank you all for your ongoing support of historic sites and our enthusiastic stakeholders who want to mark and commemorate a variety of narratives.
There's only one vote, by the way.
I'm sorry,
And
are we having a little ambient noise? Okay. I am also wanting to just remind us that we did have the last time we met, we had just a very simple marker request from an Eagle Scout project. So working with Phil, he's helped us to understand some of these distinctions. I think it would be also important for you to note that there are multiple chapters of the Daughters of the American Revolution in the vicinity of the site that have a variety of kind of commemorative marking efforts that they're advocating for. So this is a distinctive one. I want to make it clear that this is actually distinctive from the other matter. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to you because it's very short. And I think it would be better for you to hear directly. And this has passed muster with the division. The Temperance Smith Alston Chapter 3-124C of Pinehurst, chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. They've submitted to the House and the Horseshoe to whom it may concern. As Regent Temperance Smith Alston Chapter, she's requesting approval of a bronze engraved plaque, 10 inches by 10 inches or larger, but 10 inches by 10 inches is what their official request says, be approved to hang in the museum area of the House and the Horseshoe, and this would commemorate their efforts to restore the historic chimneys of the Alston House, which did involve the identification of a specialist. It's very hard to find people who specialize in this kind of restoration. The proposed plaque would read, Temperance Smith Alston Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, Pinehurst, North Carolina, raise funds for the historic preservation of both chimneys at the Alston House, work completed December 2020. And then it also, there's a note that just says the plaque would not require archaeological clearance because it would be in the visitor center area. So we are okay with this concept at the division level and bring it before you all as a body. And I think that when speaking with Phil, because it's not interpretive signage or wayside signage, and because it is indeed a plaque, it is indeed bronze, in conversation with Phil, we agreed that we would bring it before you. That is all the information I have to share, and I will turn it over to you all.
And for the public, of course, Ms. Lanier is director of the North Carolina Division of State Historic Sites, does a great job with that, and thank you very much. So largely what transpired 3 months ago was, again, from my perspective, more of a style versus substance issue around just the nature of the plaque, the nature of how it's would fit into the appropriate guidelines. If that's
Yes,
layman's.
again, that was a different project from this one. Same site, different chapter, different project. In that situation, there was a large commemorative piece that had already been produced without seeking input or guidance from the site. This is a very different situation. It's a small piece. They are seeking guidance from us before fabrication. And so
Okay.
I wanted to make sure to have the records reflect this is a distinctive.
Oh, thank you. I was conflating the two, frankly. Thank you very much. Okay, do we hear any discussion of this matter or potential motion, presumably approving the placement of the plaque?
This is Susan Phillips. I'll move that we approve the recommendation of the division and allow the 10 by 10 inch bronze plaque to be displayed in the museum alongside other recognitions of that sort.
I'll second that.
Moved by Commissioner Phillips, seconded by Mayor Clark. Do I hear any discussion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote on that motion. Commissioner or Dr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Condell,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Snowden,
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. So approved. And thank you, Ms. Lanier, for the distinction between that, because I was somewhat flawed in conflating the two matters that we discussed last time. So now, again, this is a fairly routine agenda today. We'll move to what we almost inevitably do every meeting, and that is to discuss our accessions and deaccessions from museums and historic sites in North Carolina. And Sarah, I normally go to you on that, and I presume as well today as well. Is that correct?
I will handle the deaccessions from the state archives, but I believe Dr. Waters can do the
We can.
accessions from the history museum.
Okay, all right.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ken, you're here, so you can help us walk through these two if you're willing to do that.
Glad to.
So we have the proposed accessions for the Museum of History. Do we want to take all of these in one slate, Mr. Chair?
If that would, since we have director reports, I would propose that we do it that way. If we obviously have to bifurcate to some degree some of the deaccession approval.
Yes.
But I do think that unless we hear an objection, we'd like to kind of lump these in together.
Well, the internal committee has approved these to come before the committee for consideration for accessions. Ken, do you want to add anything about the items that are for the Museum of History, Museum of the Albemarle and Maritime Museums in the North Carolina state? Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. We've got, again, a large assortment we've got some furniture this time. We've got some, one piece from a contemporary of Thomas Day is on the agenda. We've got women's hats. We've got lots of toys and games that came about as a result of our recent toy exhibit where we borrowed some things and they wanted to donate to the museum. We've got other information, other things regarding a collection of silver from the Congressman George White, Henry White Center. This was a presentation of a water pitcher and goblets that was made to him while he was in Congress. So these are things that we would propose to be collecting, again, an assortment of things commemorating or recognizing the pandemic, recognizing World War II. We just got a whole assortment of things. For the maritime museums, they are collecting a fair number of, well, let me back up on one thing. One thing we have come across is a Richard Caswell miniature painting and newspaper paper clipping. And This was really interesting because he was the North Carolina's first governor and also the fifth governor. But it's a gold locket with a lock of hair believed to be his, and it's supposedly the only known image of Caswell. It's not in great shape. We're hoping to maybe be able to raise some money at some time to have it have some work done on it. But it's a really interesting piece, and this is not something we come across very often. So I will point out that as being something of significance in the things we're collecting. Some of you may not know that Cecil B. DeMille was from North Carolina. We have a photo of him. We're collecting for our movie collection, and of course, lots of sports related things as we expand our sports collection for our upcoming expansion of the museum and the Sports Hall of Fame. We're looking for some things to go along with that. The Museum of Albemarle is collecting some carved duck decoys and some other things. The interesting thing, a screw pile, which was something that was used for some of their early bridges in the county, in Tyrrell County. So just some really interesting things that have come across our desk. We've got some trick or treat things from back in the 60s, and the Maritime Museum has an assortment of clocks, maritime clocks, as well as some assortment of maritime paintings and ships models, obviously things that they would like to have for their collection. That's about it. And then State Historic Sites has some things for the CSS News Civil War Center, a newspaper from Harper's Weekly, and then some Civil War artifacts. And then the ACOC sign, both Historic Sites and the museum are taking each of the ACOC sign when the street was decommissioned from and renamed from ACOC to Roanoke Park Drive. And they've got some furniture and some other things that they are collecting. So any questions on any of those things?
And thank you.
You learn every day. I was, for all these many years, I always thought Cecil B. DeMille grew up in Greenville, North Carolina. It's in Beaufort County, Washington, Little Washington. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Michelle. Is there anything you want to add from State Historic Sites?
Just to add, thank you. Just to add a little context, we did just have a ribbon cutting event at the CSS News Interpretive Center in Kinston. We want to thank Ken, you and your team for helping us to flesh out that exhibit with some really important artifacts. Because it is a Confederate gunboat, it was important for us, particularly in this moment that we're in, to make sure that we tell a more diverse story there, and so that we have a U.S. color troop story that's there as well. The ACOC sign was a debate amongst some of our staff because of typically, we try to collect around the particular time period of the sites, but because of our increased efforts to think about the legacies of our sites, and particularly in this case, Governor Aycock's legacy and the kind of the way in which his name is being looked at today, we felt it was important for us to have one of those signs. And it was great that there were two, so that the Museum of History could have one and the Division of Historic Sites could have one.
So thank you, Michelle. So Mr. Chair, turn it back over to you for a vote on these items.
So at this point, are we going to discuss anything with the historic or the maritime? Well, you just touched on maritime. Did we went through the historic sites as well?
Yes.
Okay. So do I hear any discussion further on any of the proposed accessions to the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Museum of the Albemarle, the North Carolina Maritime Museums, and the NC State Historic Sites? Any discussion?
I make a motion that we accept the recommendation of staff and approve these accessions. This is
Thank
Barbara.
you. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Snowden. We hear you loud and clear now. Thank you.
Good.
And I will second that. All right.
Dr. Denard seconds it on the Snowden motion to adopt these or approve these accessions. I presume no other discussion, so we'll move to a vote. Dr. Bryan,
Yes, I agree.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes,
Commissioner Snowden,
yes,
David Ruffin, yes. Okay, so let's then move Dr. Waters, I guess, to the proposed deaccessions.
Yes. So these
And
have,
if I believe, then I'll wait until we get to the end of that discussion. These are proposed from the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Maritime Museums, and the North Carolina State Historic Sites. And then we'll ask for, or we'll determine at the conclusion of the presentation of the proposed deaccessions as to what we need to do relative to the dispensation of those, because technically sometimes we have to differentiate the way we approve that, or actually additionally approve the method of deaccession.
yes. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So proposed deaccessions have been approved by staff and the committee, internal committee. So I'm gonna, again, Ken, look to you on the museums, and then we'll turn to Michelle for any comment for state historic sites on the proposed deaccessions.
Okay, thank you. The first thing we have is a cadet uniform from Randolph-Macon Academy. It doesn't really pertain to our collection, although it was worn by someone who's from North Carolina. We actually have some better representations of military academies that were in North Carolina. So we want to deaccession that, and I believe we're recommending to return that back to the donor. Actually, I'm sorry, we're going to transfer it to the Warren County Heritage Society in Front Royal, Virginia, since that's where the Randolph-Macon was located. We're also looking at some ship's commode that, again, for the Maritime Museum, that was not in use here in North Carolina, was out of area construction. It was actually used in European vessels. We're proposing to auction that off. We have several plaques and things from Admiral James W. Davis, including plaques from the various ships that he served on, and a couple of other things from his. And we're going to recommend that these be transferred to East Carolina University. They have his papers and his photographs, or we may donate them to a U.S. Navy museum, but that's where we're going to send those. In addition, we have and that's it for the historic sites. Michelle, I don't know if you want to go through those as well.
Sure, I'll go through those. We do have a lot of activity happening at the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum. There'll be some important announcements coming up within the next few months that will kind of give you a sense of why we are focusing a lot on the condition of that site. And so I think it's important for you all to note that 2 of those deaccessions have to do with wood-eating insects. We are working on that, and we're in a better condition now, thanks to a wonderful budget that we'll talk about more. We also found within the collection a pretty fragile news article that we do have another version of, and it looked like it was on loan and needed to be returned to the sender. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but the other item that you'll note is that we do have a period frame that's just too frail at the House in the Horseshoe. The portrait itself is a reproduction. I think it's a pretty strong reproduction, but it was reproduced in the 50s. And so it will get a new frame that's appropriate for that reproduction, but this period frame is going to need to come off. So happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ken. So, Mr. Chair, I turn it over to you.
So if presuming there are no further questions, do I hear a motion on jointly approving the proposed staff deaccessions to the North Carolina Museum of History, the North Carolina Maritime Museum, and the North Carolina State Historic Sites as collectively proposed by staff.
This is Dr. Johnson. I so move to accept the staff recommendations for deaccession.
Dr. Johnson has moved. Do I hear a second?
Susan Phillips, second.
Commissioner Phillips has seconded. All in favor, so indicate by vote. Dr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Snowden,
yes,
and David Ruffin, yes. Okay, with the, one of the items of the, I guess is the ship's commode to be auctioned, is that required Phil of a separate approval? I have to ask this every time, it seems. But to approve that method of deaccession as opposed to destruction?
I think that you can defer to staff on that, on pursuing the recommendation and do it all as a single vote.
Okay, so we just voted to approve the deaccession. So, but there, from your perspective, there shouldn't be needed a separate vote to approve the method of one of the deaccessions. Okay.
I don't believe so. If you've adopted the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. That's good. Then we will move on to the division directors reports. And Dr. Waters, I will defer back to you in terms of the order in which the directors will be giving their reports.
And I think before we do that, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Parker, did you have some, I beg your pardon.
The accession about archives on the separate agenda item.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm looking at this document and it ended there. I beg your pardon. Yes, we need to go to the, before we move on, the archives. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
That's where Sarah comes in.
Yeah.
I kept
That's where I
thinking to
get to weigh
myself,
in.
no, I haven't heard from Sarah yet. So
That's right. Okay, well, now you can hear from me briefly about our deaccessions. So I bring you today 3 deaccessions from our project to review state agency materials. This is part of our ongoing efforts to ensure that what we are saving from state agencies is really of archival value, of enduring value, documenting the history, finances, legal aspects, long-term goals of an agency, and not routine matters. So these were items that have been accessioned in the past and have come up in reevaluation. So in each case, we always speak to the creating agency to confirm that they agree with our evaluation and seek their input on if they're okay if we destroy it. In some cases, they like it back. This meeting, it's 3 agencies and they all were fine with the materials being destroyed. So you have a series of 25 cubic feet from the Department of Crime Control and Public Safety, some routine grant funding information that is very routine in nature, not permanent. And we really felt like the permanent records from the Crime Commission, including the minutes and correspondence, better documented the thrust and overall program of that grant program, not just sort of like routine budgets from an individual grant. There's also a small series from the Department of Public Instruction that, again, carbon copies of basically bills that were paid, not at all archival, that was brought in, probably should never have been accessioned, brought in under the umbrella of a former staff member who thought we should keep them, but really that's documented much better in other financial series that are kept permanently. And then from the Department of Insurance, 181 cubic feet and 965 reels. If you're very interested in old insurance policies, this is your series. It's just a series of policies that were submitted to the Department of Insurance prior to their approval and the documentation that goes with it. So just like the sample policies and some materials behind it. state statute says that the insurance companies themselves only have to keep the policy, the draft policy, for 5 years. So again, Department of Insurance is in agreement. All three of those series, we are recommending that they be destroyed.
Thank you very much for, again, the public. Sarah Kuntz is state archivist, does also an excellent job. Thank you very much. Sorry for the oversight on the agenda. Do we hear any discussion or comments relative to the three items? I believe there were three that you were proposing to for deaccession. Do I hear any discussion? Do I hear a motion to accept staff's recommendation or the state archivist's recommendation for these three deaccessions?
I move that we accept the staff's recommendation.
Thank
Denard.
you, Dr. Denard. Do I hear a second?
I'll second Dr.
Second.
Denard.
I believe that was Commissioner Dixon. I believe.
Mayor Clark.
Mayor Clark, I beg your pardon. Beg your pardon. Okay, all in favor of the recommended deaccessions from the state archivist, please indicate in such order. Dr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Condell,
Yes.
Dr. Denard,
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon,
Yes.
Commissioner Groom,
Yes.
Dr. Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Snowden,
Yes.
David Ruffin, yes. Okay, at this point, we go to back to Deputy Secretary Dr. Waters to call the roll, so to speak, of the directors that will be giving reports to the commission. And we do look forward to this. Again, I feel like I'm speaking somewhat to the public in this that are listening. These reports are not perfunctory. They are just really the day-to-day work and effort that goes on in our great department and should be valued for exactly that, because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And I know for a fact that all of our commissioners are just extremely proud of and appreciative of all of this work. So we basically agree, I think, that we get reports semi-annually from the division heads, and we look forward to hearing you again today.
Thank you, Chairman Ruffin. And let me just say, I can't add to what you just said, but I will say that this is a wonderful team that I get the opportunity to work with. And so I'm looking forward to hearing the reports as well. You had a chance to see them, and I'm going to turn to Sarah Kuntz first.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Waters. Hello again. And for my report today, I checked with Dr. Waters earlier this week. I'm just going to highlight a few things from my written report. You certainly can read it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And then I thought I would use the rest of my time to give you a brief America 250th update. I've spoken with some of you and am going to speak to some of you in the near future, but I thought it's always good to kind of have a periodic refreshing of what's happening. And if you're hearing ambient noise, I'm sorry, we've got some sirens downtown here. So from the archives, just a couple brief things that I wanted to pull out. I'm so excited. Tours are returning to the archives. And we just in the last week have had requests for some associations like the Mayflower Society, a DAR chapter, an AP high school history teacher from Nash County who's worked with us in the past says, oh, we're finally able to go on school trips again. He'll be back down for a program with us. General Assembly members. So that's very exciting that we are returning to in-person programming in the archives. And I've been very happy to see regular relationships being built, such as the Outer Banks History Center does a program with a homeschool group on a monthly basis, where they're kind of like the history classroom for this group. So it's nice to see those long-term relationships being built. And then I also wanted to highlight that I really think in the last couple of years, we've done a lot to expand our regular outreach programming and our collaborations, not just within the agency, but external to the NCR. We are now having a monthly webinar, mostly in the evening, sometimes during the day, but an educational program on a variety of topics. Yesterday, we had a great program on a couple of PhD scholars who used our resources for their research. One was on women healers across history, and the other one is researching murder ballads and their role in our culture. So it was great to hear from them, and we're really excited that on April 7th, the North Carolina Poet Laureate Jackie Shelton Green is going to give our April program, since it's National Poetry Month. She's going to do a history and verse program for us, and then that'll allow us to highlight a few examples of some historical poetry in our collection. We are doing quarterly trivia nights with the North Carolina Trivia Nights with the State Library. Sort of put a place marker in November if you're interested, in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the department's founding. We're going to do one specifically on the department, and so we're very excited about that. So maybe some of us will see ourselves in a question if we've been around a long time. We've got some other great collaborations going. I'm very pleased that our new head of special collections, Judy Allen Dodson, has been collaborating with the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission to launch a new initiative called Black Carolinians Speak, which is seeking specifically to document the experiences of African Americans in North Carolina in the pandemic. Seeking to do that through things like documents, photographs, audiovisual materials, personal accounts, oral histories, things like that. So we look forward to what that collaboration will bring in the future. And along those same lines, I couldn't be more pleased with the expansion of our oral history program. Our oral historian has been with us a year, and he's just really going great guns. He's already gotten 43 interviews for our COVID-19 oral history program, where we're trying to capture the stories of state government leaders and how their agencies adapted to the pandemic. And just last week, we sat down and we're strategizing what pieces are we missing and trying to find connections into those departments to just continue to broaden that. And at the same time, he's been gradually building up a school integration oral history program. And he's already got 11 interviews and 3 more scheduled. He's kind of adding to those. And we're very appreciative of people who are sending us contacts to expand that program. And one of the neat things he showed me last week was, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the StoryCorps program with the Library of Congress. They have started doing some animated shorts from their oral histories. So he's done a sample of one of the school integration oral histories. This one was from Charmaine McKissick Melton, and they animated a short clip of where she talks about talking about her experience in school integration with Dr. King. So that was kind of neat. It's just in the prototype phase yet, but it's looking really good. And so we strategized about how we could kind of strategically expand that a little bit and maybe help draw more attention to the program, and really kind of provide people with another way to engage with an oral history by taking a small piece of it and animating it. So watch for more on that. We're very excited by that opportunity. So shifting quickly to America 250th. So we've got a lot going on. I feel like it's sort of America 250th all the time. Just sort of to reset, we will start our commemoration in the state on April 12th, 2024. We thought it was appropriate to start with the Halifax Resolves. And while the national high water mark will be in 2026, we in North Carolina, as in many states, we're going to continue through the entire 250th anniversary of the conflict. So we would anticipate having some programming continuing well into 2032. And what we're really trying to do is integrate it with all DNCR divisions and programs. And so some of what I'm saying today is just kind of like the beginning planning from DNCR, as well as our work with interested parties statewide. So we have identified thematic statements that we think fit where we want to go with, in keeping with our department's strategic goals of being expansive in who we serve and the stories that we tell, and really promoting education. So our 3 thematic statements are visions of freedom. The American Revolution was the beginning of a continual journey for North Carolinians to seek true freedom. Gathering of voices. North Carolina's many voices inspire future generations to create and lead. And common ground. Places carry our stories of struggle, creation, and connection to one another. So we really feel like those themes will help us encompass all parts of DNCR, from the built environment to the natural resources to historic sites and things like that. And it will also allow us to explore all 250 years of our timeline of the history of our state. We do have a big committee within DNCR planning, as well as quarterly meetings with interested statewide stakeholders. Right now, we have been using permanent staff within the department, as well as some temporary staff to manage our planning. And we are continuously asking the General Assembly for additional funds. And we're also always looking for grant funds. I think some of my colleagues on this call are very familiar with me knocking on their door saying, hey, do we want to apply for another grant? So we're always looking for sources of funding for the commemoration planning. Just a little bit about what we've got going. DNCR has created a website with plans to expand it. We've got a calendar going, and hopefully soon we will be able to allow stakeholders to submit events as well, so that everyone can see what's going on statewide. We just launched a newsletter. Blogs are coming. We're coordinating with DNCR marketing to develop a web-based application that will govern all of our trails, cultural and natural, and that will, America 250th will be a part of that, but that's going to be a great resource for all of our trail-based resources. And we have published on our website the very first iteration of a community planning guide, with hopes to continue to expand that, to give other communities an idea of ways they can connect with the 250th commemoration. And a promotional video is underway in conjunction with DNCR marketing. We're starting to do some more outreach to community local governments, associations. I'm due to speak to the Association of Registers of Deeds next week, and other community groups to start getting the word out about America 250th. We have requested some travel support to increase that outreach. And we're planning on utilizing other DNCR resources that are under development for further promotion in the future. So, for example, the marketing department is in the process of developing a mobile museum with an Airstream trailer. And so in the future, we could take that on the road to help promote America 250th across the state. In terms of specific bigger planning initiatives, we have a departmental education team that's working on educational resources around the 250th. That team is identifying lesson plan needs and going to start developing those. So that's gaps that might be in our online North Carolina history textbook, and add to those. We're also planning some teacher workshops to support those efforts. We are working on a wayside program, not just within our state, but also trying to work collaboratively with the Southern states to promote the entire Southern campaign story in some way, to kind of connect it with what's going on in other states. And our exhibit, we have a DNCR exhibit team thinking through what traveling exhibits will be created, how can we create virtual exhibits, and other exhibit resources such as print-on-demand exhibits that a teacher could use in a classroom, or that a local historical society could print and use for their activities. And related to that, the State Historical Records Advisory Board has a new grant, and part of that grant will involve creating some resources and training opportunities to bolster local planning. And so they'll be doing some training around best practices in oral histories, community history harvests or scanning days. What are some inexpensive ways to do digital storytelling? And we're hoping that all those components of the training will help communities think through how they can themselves maybe take these themes that we've developed on a statewide level and apply them in their communities. Who are our visionaries of freedom? Where do we find common ground? And then program around that, and maybe use some of our print-on-demand exhibits to support what they're planning, as I just mentioned. So oodles of other resources planned, reading lists, hopefully some kits that kids can check out in libraries with a book, a game, other things like that they can utilize. So we're working on that. As I mentioned, we're connecting with all DNCR divisions and trying to kind of leverage places where we can connect together. So, for example, what could we do with the archaeological story of the 250th in conjunction with state historic sites? Where does the archives fit into the educational piece? Maybe we can create a Doc in a Box program with primary resources. How do our state natural trails overlap with our desire for America 250th Wayside? So we're trying to kind of make those connections and make it departmental. And then we're also looking outside for other possible collaborations. Is there a way we could connect with the UNC system to foster maybe a seminar on public history and the America 250th, or how our cultural collective memory of and how we celebrate these milestones, things like that. So that was a lot in a short period of time.
Yes.
We're going on, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I don't want to take any more time away from my colleagues because they've got some great things to report from their divisions as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Coons,
Mhm.
question for you. Are you kind of looking over your shoulder to see what our neighbors are doing as they celebrate 250, so that we can continue to accelerate, our game and rise above whatever they're doing?
Yes, we are. We have a quarterly call with Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee to talk specifically about waysides and historic corridors, but it gives us a good opportunity to kind of hear what they're up to. And we do also have quarterly calls with the other states that have already started planning, and that's connected through the National Foundation. So it's a good opportunity. So yeah, we're always kind of listening and watching what other states are doing to see if we could do it and do it better, because we have
Okay.
DNCR.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions for Sarah?
Good report, Sarah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Groom, she's muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I'm excited about you connecting with the UNC college systems so that they can also reach out into the community and the schools and create presentations together, create studies together. That's exciting. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And I should have said, if any of you have suggestions on making community connections, groups we should connect with, please do not hesitate to let me know. I sort of feel like a sponge, and just bring it to me and we'll try to see what we can make work.
Any other questions? So if not, Mr. Chair, and let me just thank Sarah too, and for all of the other work that she has to do, that she's taken on leadership with America 250. And so I want to thank her for that. The whole department does. And so thank you so much, Sarah.
Indeed.
So we'll now turn to Michelle Lanier with State Historic Sites. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Waters and Chairman Ruffin and commissioners and colleagues. Want to also thank Sarah for her work leading us in the 250th planning. As you all can imagine, historic sites will be very involved, very much at the center of several initiatives. We're specifically looking at historic Halifax, of course, but we're also thinking about, under the theme, when are we us, how we can continue to grow our concept of true inclusion. We're thinking about the work that we're doing to continue to grow our relationships with our American Indian populations throughout the state, acknowledging that these are nations that have thousands of years of history in what we now call North Carolina. And of course, our African American story, talking about the complex journey towards citizenship and citizenship rights for American Indians, for immigrant populations, and for African Americans. So we're excited to continue to think in and dream into innovative ways to tell the story of our nation's birthday. We are in a powerful growth spurt for the Division of Historic Sites. We received an unprecedented budget signed into law by the governor, passed into law, of course, it was a bipartisan effort. We really have such an amazing leadership team at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources with Dr. Waters, with Deans Eatman, our legislative liaison, with Secretary Reed Wilson, for us to be able to say that we have calculated a $47 million impact from the budget that was just passed it's right there in your notes. Maybe it was tucked away, but it's at the very second line of your report there. If you want to read along with me, $47 million. We have already, as you all know, begun this expansion of bringing in the Golden and Ruth Frink's Freedom House story at Edenton, but we have another powerful story that's coming online, and that is the Hayes property. Really important 18th century story. Commissioner Dixon has been critical in terms of his advocacy there. I will take a point of privilege and say that Commissioner Dixon and I are working on growing our relationships between the historic infrastructure of Edenton around a number of other properties. We're looking at the jail and the Harriet Jacobs story as it connects to the jail, but we're also looking at how we can be good neighbors and supporters of what you all are doing at Kadish, which is a wonderful success story, a powerful victory there. Shallow Ford, really important 250th story along the Yadkin River there. That has been funded. We are working really closely. This is really like partnership on top of partnership. Historic sites and the Land and Water Trust and the Conservation Fund and local stakeholders all coming together to conserve that land. I do not have to tell you all that development in North Carolina is just like almost unchecked. And so to be able to conserve land for historic preservation and then thinking about the ecological impacts of that, the touristic impacts of that, the quality of life and public health impacts of that conservation is really, really inspiring to us. And then I have saved this one for last because I think it's a long, long time dream for the department. We are in the final processes of acquiring the Thomas Day. Well, I shouldn't say final. We're in the beginning stages of the final leg of acquiring the Thomas Day house and shop, the tavern there in Milton and Caswell County. Hopefully you all know that Thomas Day was a free man of color, was an artisan of great renown, and in fact, Ken mentioned that you all just acquired, I think, another piece of Thomas Day, but the North Carolina Museum of History has one of the largest collections, if not the largest, I think, in the country. We have, of course, been working to support our staff in continuing to face the realities of COVID and all the variants. They are, as I say, every time I talk to you all since 2020, they're exhausted. We're working really hard to try to help them restore those energetic, cabinets so that they can come out and do the work that they need to do. But they are pretty depleted, and we're working at the leadership level to focus on the fulfillment aspects of what they do, so that they can be good public historians, but also we want to be good managers of their well-being as well. We did cross an important threshold at Fort Fisher State Historic Site. They're the first historic site in the history of the division to exceed 1 million visitors in the course of 1 year. And in the calendar year of 2021, historic sites counted 1,650,198 visitors. And we've also reached over 73,000 audience members through our outreach events as well, which we count differently than visitors to our sites. We also are looking at achieving a great deal of work through our craft services team. I don't shout them out enough. Our craft services team, they go up in the lifts and they go on roofs and they carry power tools, and they're doing an exceptional work all across the state. We were happy to be able to also help with the Museum of History at times and Mountain Gateway. But they are sometimes having to leave their family from days on end and working on a number of projects. One really important project that connects to the 250th is the William R. Davie House. Many of you will know William R. Davie is the father of UNC Chapel, one of the fathers of UNC Chapel Hill. But that house, it needed some plaster work, it needs some support, and we are in that process right now. We are excited that Historic Edenton, I mean, so much going on there, but they were featured in the February 2021 edition of the, I think that might be 22. I'll have to check and see if that was 21 or 22. We may need to correct that note. But in the edition of National Geographic, as part of an article called Hidden No More, and it was looking at the work of Tara Roberts, and one of the first Black women divers who looks at slave ships particularly, and I think she was the first Black woman explorer to be featured on the cover of National Geographic. Bentonville Battlefield had I have an update number for you. It says 11,000 hits on a post during Black History Month where they were connecting the dots between Thelonious Monk, Nat King Cole, and Natalie Cole to Bentonville Battlefield. These amazing musicians, their ancestors all would have been witness to the largest battle to take place on North Carolina soil. At the time of you receiving this document, we had 11,000. We now have over 18,000 hits. And Pura Fay, who is an American Indian musician, also reposted and got us a lot of amazing attention. At Fort Dobbs, we're continuing to work with Native interpreters, including Cherokee, but we also have a member of the Pueblo of Isleta tribe who are helping us to tell the story of the French and Indian War there. We also had in December at Alamance, site manager Jeremiah De Janeiro hosted a lunch and learn. So this is about how we are taking good care of our staff. We wanted to tell the story of how he was able to get his student loans forgiven based on his service to the state of North Carolina. And you can imagine that that's like receiving quite a significant raise for a state employee. And we thought, can we celebrate that by sharing with others? And so he hosted a collegial lunch and learn to share with others. We're really excited about the forthcoming American Indian Heritage Commission, particularly at sites including historic Halifax, where we're continuing to work with the Halawasa Pony, Brunswick Town, Fort Anderson, where we're continuing to work with the Wakamasuan, Fort Fisher, where we're continuing to work with the Lumbee, and Fort Dobbs, where we're continuing to work with Cherokee. But we're also seeing Town Creek Indian Mound as a multi-tribal space. We have been prioritizing getting their 40-year-old exhibit updated and looking to tribal members from across the state to be advisors for that work. And I also need to shout out James K. Polk State Historic Site. They've been working with the Catawba tribe right across the state line in South Carolina to help to tell the story of the Catawba. So we've been very busy. I'm not going to read all of my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions. One of the things that's bringing me to Edenton more and more often is we are looking to think about ways to amplify the Harriet Jacobs story, perhaps through some public art, and working with local organizations like the Reconciliation Group of Edenton and the Fannie A. Parker Women's and Youth Club, which is an extension of the National Council of Negro Women. That is their local chapter. So a lot of busy activity. I do want to say we're excited to get a few new positions, including a craft services position, which we very much need. We are also getting a Piedmont region restored to the division. In the past, we would have a Piedmont West and East, and for many years now, we've only had an East and a West. And so we're excited to restore the Piedmont. And we're also restoring a position to Historic Halifax that we lost a little while ago and are happy to get back. So a lot of activity in the division. We are hoping to be able to meet in person and have a bit of a family reunion. I'm hoping in August, where we will also launch our strategic plan, which we've been working on for several months.
Great report, Michelle, Director of State Historic Sites. So thank you so much.
And I just, this is Sam Dixon. I just need to jump in and say how much we appreciate all Michelle has done. We had a great visit. Dr. Waters, we're going to get you to Eden one day.
I'm coming really soon, Commissioner Dixon. I hate that I had to miss that trip.
Well, we had Reed Wilson and all Michelle's team, and they met with the local people on the ground, and we toured Hayes. And so if any of y'all are in this area, let me know, and I can set you up with to see Hayes, to see Kadesh, and really just to see, and the Frank's house also, that just all we have going on. And we are just so excited that I think the neat thing about Hayes and Kadesh is the connection between the two, and we just have an ability to tell a story that may not exist anywhere else. So I think that it's just a unique place with the land, the buildings. There's just so much history in that one spot. So I'd love for y'all all to come and see what we're doing. So thank you again, Michelle.
Michelle, I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner Denard.
Okay. Can you give me a thumbnail sketch on what's happening with regard to the Golden Frink property?
Yes, thank
where
you.
are we?
Yes, thank you so much. We have received 2 federal grants for our work at the Golden and Ruth Frank's Freedom House. One was a part of one of the last acts of legislation that Congressman John Lewis passed, which was the civil rights era preservation grant that is operated under the auspices of the National Park Service. So we did receive that. We also received an NEH grant, a planning grant, to work with local community members to plan and vision out the programming and interpretation of the site. So where we are is we have a new research historian named Dr. Sarah Leonard. She's our point person on the NEH grant. I believe the architect for the next steps of the preservation, we're waiting for the final signing of the contract with the architect. The way National Park Service works is before any restoration can take place, the Department of Interior has to sign off on the plan. And so we are in process and things are moving along in that regard. In terms of the NEH grant, we have brought in nationally recognized scholars. One gentleman, Maurice Hobson, who's published through UNC Press and focused on African-American history in the 20th century. Dr. Johnson, you may remember meeting Dr. Hobson when we went to Georgia State University for their convening of the Civil Rights World Heritage Area Symposium. So he has been brought on as a scholar. We've also brought in Noelle Trent, who has her doctorate from Howard University in history, and she is at the Lorraine Museum and tells the story every day of what happened at the Lorraine and the assassination of King and the upbuild to that. We also have brought in to bring in the American Indian perspective because Golden Franks actually worked with the Lumbee as well. So we have brought in Nancy Strickland Fields from UNC Pembroke and two facilitators, Janine Bryant, who's formerly of the Levine Museum of the New South, as well as Vivette Jeffries Logan. Vivette is going to help us do what we call level setting so that as a team, we are all forward facing in the same direction in terms of our values, our ethics, our best practices. And Janine will facilitate the community conversations, which I believe Dr. Denard are supposed to start in May. And so we're going to start with kind of intimate conversations right there in Edenton, talking with people who remember going in and out of that house, remember having hot dogs with the Franks family. And of course, Dr. Goldie Wells, the only child of Golden and Ruth Franks, we have funding to bring her on as a specialist as well. So things are moving together really well.
So when do you think we may reach the point where we can hold some forums there or some seminars to address the issues of civil rights that Golden Frank was so heavily involved in? And what I'm thinking here is that I know in Jackson, Mississippi, I worked with some individuals down there who started a Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And one of the umbrella projects of that Fannie Lou Hamer Institute was to write grants so that we could bring K through 12 teachers or even college teachers in some cases to teach them how to teach the civil rights movement, to develop the lesson plans, the pedagogy and all of that. And that's something, given all of the developments taking place related to voting rights and all of that, is something that we desperately need here in North Carolina. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Denard, for calling on the name of Fannie Lou Hamer as an inspiration point for this work. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we could be creative and find ways to host people, maybe working with the likes of, Commissioner Dixon, to host people in Edenton, where there can be a tour, even the spaces that are not yet renovated, even if it's just exterior tours. I think there's some creativity that can be done there. But to be completely honest, in terms of when we can go inside and use the structures, I think that we're still about 2.5, plus years off because of the careful work that we have to do working with Ramona's team on following the Secretariat of the Interior standards. This is not work that can be rushed. And so I think going in the building will take some time, but that would not stop us from showing people the exterior. So we can be creative in terms of that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Michelle? So if not, Michelle, thank you so much. And I'd just like to say also, she didn't say this in her report, but to thank her for organizing a really good visit as well to the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Palmer Institute site. The secretary had an opportunity to go. Many members of the senior team were there. And I think it deepened a commitment to do what needs to be done to really work on preservation of that site. So Michelle, I wanted to mention that and thank you for that work. So we'll turn now. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say thank you, Dr. Waters. And as I mentioned, there's a very significant announcement that's going to be coming out that I can't quite share yet that relates to the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum, and that we will see as a department and as a division as a call to action. So please stay tuned.
Thank you again, Michelle. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn to Ken Howard now for his report.
Thank you, Darren, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am going to share a presentation I've put together. I hope you all can see that. Okay, but to bring you up to date on what we have been doing with the museum. We have now over 532,000 visitors came to the museums in the last year. We had 170,000 at our Museum of History, 119,000 visited the Maritime Museum of Beaufort in 2021, 116,000 at the Graveyard of the Atlantic, 45,000 at the Museum of the Albemarle and Museum of the Cape Fear, almost 40,000 people, and Maritime Museum, 33,000, and Mountain Gateway, 8,200. In addition to these on-site visitors, we had a great number of people communicating with us or visiting us online with our digital programs. Since last July, the Museum of History, for instance, has had over 220,000 people attend one or more of our digital programs, including our digital festivals, our virtual festivals, which was the American Indian Heritage Celebration and the African American Cultural Celebration. So digital programs are here to stay. It allows us to reach a great number of people, not only across the state, but across the country. And for one of our programs, we had 5 foreign countries who had signed on to one of our programs. So we're really going to continue to make sure we invest in our digital programs. The museum this year here in Raleigh, we've got our Dressing the Abbey exhibit was an exhibit that the department helped us fund. It closed on July 17th. For those of you that are familiar with the Downton Abbey program, this exhibit contained 35 costumes from the Downton Abbey series. We had over 13,000 people come and see this exhibit in a fairly short period of time, which generated about $161,000 in gross revenues, which again, some of that money we'll be using to fund future exhibits and future educational programs. As I mentioned, our African American Cultural Celebration was held virtually on Saturday, the 28th. This year, we did a new virtual education day on Friday, the 27th, and we had over 15,000 people who signed on to that particular education day programs. Some new exhibits we have coming up: River Bridge, Sunken Secrets is an archaeology exhibit that actually we're getting from Museum of the Albemarle. They participated with state archaeology and put together a great exhibit on artifacts that were brought up at a location called River Bridge that date back to in the early 1700s, if not long before. We're also working with the Pauli Murray Institute in Durham to do an exhibit on Pauli Murray that will be opening here on May the 28th. They actually have an exhibit already put together that we're working with them on. As you know, Pauli Murray was a great educator, a leader in the civil rights programs, as well as ironically, a mentor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who did a lot of her writings based upon Pauli Murray's writings. So we're very happy to have that exhibit here. North Carolina A to Z, all about things in North Carolina, is going to open on July the 29th. And I'm glad to say that our school groups are back. We've had over 5,400 school children are scheduled to visit between March the 9th and April 8th. So things are really picking up here at the museum from that standpoint. As you know, as Michelle said, they had a great budget year. Certainly the Museum of History had a great budget year as well. We got money for our expansion of our current museum. We got money, or the foundation got money for the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction Center, the Gallant Channel campus of the Beaufort Maritime Museum, where they got $3 million in planning money for the foundation there. And we have a new permanent exhibit that's going to be done with the Graveyard of the Atlantic with about $4.2 million. The reason, just to prompt you as to why we're expanding our museum, we certainly need more exhibit space. Our story of North Carolina stops at 1960, so we have 50 years of history to catch up on. We need more space for large traveling exhibits. We've shown that exhibits like the Downton Abbey exhibit, and the next one we're going to be getting is Women in Country Music from the Grammy Awards. Those exhibits do tend to bring different audiences to the museum and also help us generate revenue to support our programs. We certainly need a largest North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. We need more storage space for artifacts. We need more and better rental space because our rental fees also help fund programs within the museum and fund exhibits. And we want to improve our visitor experiences with more technology and interactives. We're going to totally redo the museum. This will give you an idea from a 1,000-foot view what the museum is going to look like. At the Fletcher Garden, the end of the building on Jones Street, where we have a really large concrete patio, we're going to build a whole new entryway and lobby. It'll be a 4-story atrium that will be the main entrance to the museum now, as opposed to the entrance up on Edenton Street. It puts us right across from Natural Sciences and allows us to, again, where all the buses unload, to have a much easier visit for them to come into the museum as opposed to hiking all the way up to Edenton Street. This gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. One of the major things we're doing with this atrium is we're going to be housing 4 Wright Brothers aircraft. I think more Wright Brothers aircraft in any museum in the country. We're going to start with the 1902 aircraft that they flew before the 1903. That aircraft is on loan to us from the National Park Service. We have the 1903 Flyer. We're getting a contribution of the 1908 Flyer that they took to France. And then we're getting we already have a replica of the 1911 Flyer, which was the last thing that they flew in North Carolina. The other end of the building, this is the current end at Edenton Street. You'll see it looks very different. We've done away with the columns. We're pushing the walls out past the columns to allow us more exhibit space. We're going to have a much bigger Sports Hall of Fame on this end of the building. We're also doing a new entryway down here on Edenton Street because we're keeping our auditorium where it is. And so we want to have a nicer entrance for evening programs where people can come into the museum from the Edenton Street end without having to go all the way down to Jones Street and walk all the way back through the museum. We're doing some great things inside the lobby. We'll have a mezzanine around the lobby. This allows us more space for events. It also downstairs, we're going to be having our shop, our restaurant, and up on the 3rd floor, we'll have the Wright Brothers exhibit, which will be open to the mezzanine, open to the atrium, so people in the exhibit can get a closer look at all the Wright Brothers aircraft. To give you an idea of what it may look like, we're going to have a huge staircase with glass elevators. So it really is going to be a much nicer entryway than we have today. The current lobby gets gutted, and this will be all about the history of North Carolina on this lobby. We're going to be doing a smaller chronology exhibit than we have today, but we're going to be doing 5 thematic exhibits. They're going to focus on North Carolina origins and North Carolina communities and how we work in North Carolina and our arts of North Carolina and our famous North Carolinians, our notable North Carolinians. All those will be on this level of the museum. And this will give you an idea of what it's going to look like at night. It's going to be a much better looking building than we have now, with much more interior space for exhibits and artifact storage, and also better space for our staff as well. Currently, we've been awarded $8 million to finish our plans. It's actually part of a $60 million grant that the legislature has allocated to this project. $60 million, however, is not enough. So we're using our $8 million to plan all the way through construction drawings for the entire museum. That should be done by spring of 2023. We hope then to get more money from the legislature so we can start the entire project at one time, as opposed to having to do it in phases, and that construction should start by June of 2023. It's currently estimated that the project would cost a little over $145 million, but we really don't know for sure until we get our construction drawings done and go out to bid. Plus, we're going to do some private funding of about $35 to $40 million because we're redoing every single exhibit in the museum. We're going to have a new Children's Discovery Gallery, as I said, a new Sports Hall of Fame, a new exhibit on North Carolina's military history, a new exhibit on notable North Carolinians. So everything will be brand new inside the museum, and we're going to raise private funding to cover that. Assuming things go as planned, we anticipate to be open by June the 1st of 2026, including all of the exhibits. When the museum opened in 1994, they did not have all their exhibits done, and we do not want to do that. So we're not going to open the building until we've completed all our exhibits. We do anticipate the museum being closed for 2.5 to 3 years. Possibly, we're not positive yet, but we do anticipate we'll be closing the museum for a partial period of time. And we hope to find some off-site space that we can open up some pop-up museums or do some other things during that time that we're closed. We are already beginning work on exhibit planning. In addition to working with our architects for the building, we've also already selected 2 exhibit design firms to work with us. The Lucy Creative Group out of Chicago is going to be doing the Story of North Carolina exhibit. And the Roto Group out of Columbus, Ohio is going to be doing the exhibits on the 3rd floor, which will be the Sports Hall of Fame, the Children's Discovery Gallery, the Wright Brothers exhibit, and the Answering the Call, the North Carolina military exhibit. In addition to our project, the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction History Center received almost $60 million to begin their project. Their project actually has already started. Last year, they opened the History Village, which was opened last summer. And in this part of the site, we now have a digital learning center where we can broadcast classes out to schools across the state. We also have a meeting space with a library and some office space over there for the foundation. And in addition, we have a small house that we're using as an on-site museum to kind of tell the history of the site. Their project, they're beginning more work on their exhibit design and the content, as well as their architecture master plan will be done this year. They'll complete their building plans in 2023, and they hope to begin construction in July of 2023. That construction will continue through 2024, and we hope that by 2025, we'll be able to open this new great museum in April of that year.
Nice. Nice.
Gallant's Channel is a piece of property that the department has owned for many years in Beaufort. The issue we have with our Beaufort Museum is there is very little parking. Not only is it a very small museum, but there's no parking downtown. So when people come downtown, it's hard to find a place to park. It's hard for us to do many school programs because there's no place for the buses to park. So our goal is to take this 25-acre property that sits behind Beaufort on Gallant's Channel and to turn it into not only first a new education center building that we can use for educational classes, sailing classes, those things, but also eventually be the site of a brand new, much larger museum than what we have today. They have focused on right now, they've gotten $3 million was given to the Maritime Heritage Foundation to begin working on a site plan for this project. The initial phase will include about a 5,000 square foot maritime education center, which we hope to have done by 2024. Our initial facilities will support our maritime and marine science programming. There are several marine labs located in this area, not only the NOAA lab, but Duke and UNC and State and East Carolina all have labs down there, but they don't really have a great place to do educational classes. And so we're hoping they'll be able to use our facility to do some of these things. We also want to expand use of the Gallant's Channel site for things like pirate invasion or for the wooden boat show or other things that are done in that area. And we anticipate this really becoming an area that the entire community uses. Eventually, we want to develop an 80,000 plus square foot museum to replace the museum we have downtown that allow us more space to show the artifacts that have been brought up from the Queen Anne's Revenge, but allow us also to have more space to focus on the history of that area and on North Carolina's maritime history. In addition to all of this, the Graveyard of the Atlantic Museum at Hatteras got $4.2 million from the legislature, plus Dare County has committed another $500,000 to the project to do a nice permanent exhibit at the museum down there. If you've been to the museum, it kind of is a hodgepodge now of different exhibits that we've put together, but our goal is to build a much nicer exhibit that talks about obviously the history of the Outer Banks, the history of the Graveyard of the Atlantic, and those types of things. So we have a lot of projects going on, a lot of work being done here at the museum. In addition to beginning work on our architectural plans, our exhibit design plans, we're also working on our strategic plan. And we also are beginning a community engagement series where we're going to be engaging with different communities around this area, the African American community, American Indian, LGBT, and all these other communities in the area to get their input on what they would like to see at the museum and how we can be more inclusive of all communities in our museum. So those are the things we have going on. I don't know if y'all have any questions. My report that I wrote for you has lots more information on what the other museums are doing on programming and exhibits. But again, we'd like to thank you for your support. I'd like to thank Michelle for the support of her construction crew. They've been working with our cabins up at the Mountain Gateway Museum to help us correct some things. And then like to thank Sarah for all her work on the 250th, because that's really a big job.
Ken, who is, of course, director of the North Carolina Museum of History, who could not be excited about this really visionary presentation around where we're heading. And I would also be, frankly, remiss not to speak for the Historical Commission to thank the bipartisan leadership of the state government for providing the funds for this. And so we join you with your obvious excitement about a lot of what we just saw. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any questions for, and go ahead, Dr. Denard, I'm sorry.
Yes, I have a question for Ken, and it's not so much for Ken, it's probably for Sarah and other folk who provide these reports, and Michelle, who lists these visitors. I'm just curious about if we can identify in a snapshot the composition of our visitors. I know when we talk about students, we have these students flood these museums and historic sites and all of that. But just when I go and mill around, who are the visitors, there? Are they retired white families, or there's a good mixture of Black families and white families, Native Americans? I know when we have these special events, Black History Month oriented event, you can see a preponderance of, a certain ethnic group there. But what about, this snapshot of visitors, just going through the streets of New Bern, for example, Tryon Palace, or some other places. Is there any way of kind of tabulating a breakdown of who our visitors are, other than, what we have on students?
Dr. Denard, we do not right now keep a tally of where people are coming from, because we are a free museum, because all of us are free museums and don't ticket. We don't have that opportunity to gather more information when someone checks in to buy a ticket and indicate what their zip code is or those kind of things. But to give you just a brief idea, I do walk through the museum occasionally to get an idea. Our visitors are all over the map. Yesterday, I encountered a couple who had a 1-year-old they were bringing into the museum, and I encouraged them to come back when we finished our Children's Discovery Gallery, because by that time, that child will be 4 years old, and there'll be lots of more things for him to do. But I think we get a good mixture of race, a good mixture of in-state, a good mixture of out-of-state, and some foreign visitors. But we are trying to look at some technology that we can use that will make it easier for visitors to register where they're from, and other information that we could gather, because it is important. As part of our construction project and our design project, we are doing some surveys. We're have contracted with a survey group who is going to come down and actually do surveys of people entering the building and gathering more of that information, more of that detailed information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
Dr. Denard, to answer your question, we are ticketing for most of our tours. There is a free option for almost every site, but there's a ticket option for some. We have not started to take that data, but I can tell you just from my experience, some of it is dependent upon where the sites are. Some sites have really increased the diversity of their visitation. Stagville's done a great job. That's, definitely a site that I think has really earned the trust, particularly of African American descendant communities in and around Durham, and people who, we have one story of a woman who drove from Philadelphia to Stagville during the pandemic, during one of the uprisings, because she said she just wanted to be in a place where she felt closer to her ancestors. So she just got on the road and drove and just told Vera Siselsky, the site manager, I just need to be here. And it was a very emotional moment, but that's the kind of work that's happening at some of our sites, where people are coming to our sites as a place of solace and reflection. There are other sites where, there's very little diversity, and you can see it. And so that is a key goal for us at the Division of Historic Sites, is to diversify our visitation, to diversify our partners, our boards, our volunteers, and our staff.
Okay, thank you. And this came to mind, and I was thinking about this when Ms. Kunks, you're making your report. You're talking about the integration projects and all of that. And I normally focus on desegregation as opposed to integration, because I don't think we have gotten to the point of integrating our schools. And so when I look at these, the museums and all of that, folk have choices here to make, I'm just wondering the extent to which, these sites, have embraced, integration. And I know we're working to some extent to promote diversity and all of that and inclusion and so forth and so on. But I still see a scene almost like what I see in the suburban schools, they are, they're not desegregated. Well, they are desegregated, but they haven't integrated. And then you have basically white schools in the suburbs and Black schools in the inner city, where we talk about diversity and all of that. So I was just thinking about this alongside of what we see, when we walk through these historic sites and what's happening here. I mean, I know folk have choices and they make choices and all of that, but if we're investing so much, in the history, we want it to be something that will appeal to all of these folk, and folk will not think that, well, I'm going to Tryon Palace, because Tryon Palace, has this kind of history as opposed to, this kind of history. And it's not really my palace, some folk would say, because it has not really been open to me throughout the history of the palace. And that's what we're trying to manipulate, that to change that mindset so that you don't have to think of ECU as the old ECU, but ECU as a new state, institution now, and you can feel, welcome there. And I'm not saying students do not feel welcome there, but I'm saying when I go out throughout the community, I do hear these old traditional concerns, like that's their school as opposed to our school, or that's their Wright brothers as opposed to our Wright brothers, that's their astronauts as opposed to our astronauts. And we saw that in the 50s and 60s when folk were embracing life that way. And I'm not so sure that we have gotten very far away from that at this point in terms of the way folk, make these choices. So we have to keep trying to manipulate, our work to do whatever we can to bring about a paradigm shift. Okay, that's my little spiel for today. Thank you.
May I add one thing to the comments of Ken and Michelle? To your point, Dr. Denard, I would say that the Office of Archives and History and DNCR is very focused on more than just, let's have a diverse community for an event. It's about building relationships and to Michelle's focus and cites true inclusion. And we've started the process of reviewing the visitor experience at some sites and museums and a state park, with the idea that an outside review of that can help us identify places where more work needs to be done with diversifying stakeholder groups, friends groups, exhibits, the whole package, to get at your exact point, that it's a full inclusion and not just a periodic visit or not feeling like someone's welcome or included in full participation in our assets. So that's the goal, and that's part of the department's strategic goal as well. So we're working on it. But to Michelle's point, we're aware there's some spots that need some definite work.
Okay.
And Dr. Denard, I can echo Sarah's words. I'm glad that she pointed that out, that the department is deeply committed to this work. And as Sarah alluded to, we've engaged an outside firm that is helping us walk through this. And the work that Deputy Secretary Burns is doing on the diversity, equity, access, and inclusion work is important to how this is going to move forward. So we are, the department, I'm happy to be able to report to the department is deeply committed to moving that needle. And so I ask you to stay tuned.
Okay, I will.
Any other questions for Ken, or any other comments? No, thank you so much, Ken, for that. We're going to turn now to Ramona Bartos from Ramona, thank you. Last but not least, there's so much going on in her area. So Ramona, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bars. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And like the others, I have provided a lengthier report, which I will not read aloud to you, but in the interest of helping me and helping you, I bold-faced some items that I wanted to bring forward to you and to our public who's listening in as well. So like everyone else, everyone on the call, everyone in the world, we have been proceeding back to some sense of normalcy through what hopefully is the last phase of the COVID pandemic. And we're very thankful to the department to have fostered a pilot teleworking program, a protocol that allows most of the job classifications that we have in our division, which is a division of historical resources, as you know, the ability to telework at least part of the week. And I want to mention that in reference to recruitment and retention as well. We've had several vacancies come about, some through retirements, which were going to be inevitably happening, some through spouses leaving the state and the spouse who's employed by us following that family member. And so part of the recruitment and retention is we are seeing, and I think this is true throughout our agency and probably state government based in Raleigh, for example, as well as high cost areas like Asheville and the Outer Banks. People are living farther and farther away, especially if they're new to state government. Trying to find affordable housing is something that is a little challenging. Just in case you're not from the Raleigh or Asheville areas, the median home value in both of those metro areas is now exceeding $400,000. This is not an extravagant home. This is a middle class kind of home. And so state employees, I am finding, are living farther and farther away. So for me, from my perspective, making teleworking even more of a human resources tool for state government and public service employment is something that I would encourage our agency and state government to keep up with. So that's something that I think will be a good thing. It does require some adjustment, as we've all found out, but we're able. I think the lemons of COVID have brought us the ability to come together in this format. So moving on to some of the sections of our division. For those of you in Asheville, and Dr. Waters was one of the first calls on this, as well as our colleague Sarah Kuntz. Water where it didn't belong is something you hear about. We talk about a great deal in terms of hurricanes and resiliency and disaster preparedness. Well, it was a freak incident over at the Western office. One early, it's always over a weekend when things like this happen. Outside temperatures were quite below freezing, and a water line in an attic air handler unit. I had to go look up what that was exactly. It broke. And water then started to pour forth from said pipe, and it went all the way from the attic to the basement of the Western office. And the only way we found out about it, because of how freak of a thing it was the motion detector went off, which Capital Area Police were called our colleague Jeff Futch. And so as a result, the way the water flowed, we did have a little bit of damage to each level of the building. Ceilings, light fixtures, the elevator equipment main circuit board, for example, was shorted out. So we're continuing with repairs. Thankfully, the archives section had minimal impact aside from those items. And Sarah, I look to you later on to help me answer any questions about that. But everything was dried out and recovered. But big kudos to our Western Regional Supervisor, Jeff Futch, who just coincidentally is on our CREST team, which is to help other people with this kind of thing. And in this case, we helped ourselves with this recovery effort. So it's not just in our coastal counties. And just as a reminder, I think you might have remembered I talked about a hurricane flooding incident for the basement of the Western office, because there was just so much water coming down in the Asheville area, creating some flash floods. So hopefully that's as much excitement as we'll have in that realm this year. Exhibits are reopening at the Western office, and we're glad to be hosting one that's coming from the History Museum, which is entitled Freedom, Promise Disrupted. This was at the History Museum in 2019. So this is going to give our Western constituents an opportunity to experience that. We have several public events that we're also trying to foster additional attendance. So I recommend to you for your reference those items which I have in the report. Additionally, we are going to be doing Western Regional History Day, which will be actually this week. And so we're doing that virtual one more time, but we're hopeful in 2023, we're going to get back to in person. And just as an aside, I don't have this in the report, but Dr. Waters and others, we've been talking about how to foster more we have a self-selected group of students that are very interested in public history. How do we help them figure out some different career paths in public history? They're kind of a captive audience, if you will. We're working very directly with them. So we're starting to have some discussions internally, and I'm hopeful we'll have some more to report to you about that idea coming forward maybe next time. The Office of State Archaeology has continued its Submerged North Carolina. Again, some of the COVID lemonade, we're able to attract a lot of people who normally would not be able to come to our lectures and so forth. And in fact, we've had people from throughout the world, the United Kingdom, Romania, US minor outlying islands, several European nations, including down in Central America and South America. And we've had almost 4,000 people attending these webinars, which has been great, especially considering we're talking about historic places that are not really accessible to any of us, minus some equipment and boats and so forth. So that's been a really great outcome. We've also been working very closely with the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, and we've been working again on the interpretation, the understanding of. We always hear about the Queen Anne's Revenge. Ken himself mentioned that as far as artifacts we want to feature at some of the museums, but its identity also as La Concorde, which was a slaver ship. And so we are very happy and very pleased and honored to continue that close partnership with the commission to explore the role of this ship in the historic transatlantic, really what's human trafficking trade. We also want to point out we're always partnering with local universities and sometimes universities farther afield, in this case, Northwestern out of Illinois, as well as East Carolina, to investigate the lower Cape Fear River and its tributaries with some archaeology technology, that's maritime geophysics and target diving, and some very interesting subsurface anomalies. In other words, stuff underwater has been identified that suggest we can learn some more from those places about the historic rice cultivation. And as a reminder, we are part of the Gullah Geechee Trail. South Carolina and Georgia always get a lot of the press on that, but we also are part of that historic region of rice cultivation. In the State Historic Preservation Office, this was sort of a delightful surprise. There's always some effort to advocate for this, but the legislature seemingly on their own, without a lot of urging from the public at this time, went ahead and extended our state historic tax credits from 2024 to 2030. So that's wonderful. That provides a lot of consistency for our constituents and continuity for projects that they had planned. But what was really unexpected was if you were around on this commission or working with our department back in 2015, there was a large tax reform effort that actually did away with our state historic tax credits. They came back in a different format somewhat. But one of the things that we really did not expect to come back was what had been an extraordinarily generous mill credit program. We have such a long legacy of manufacturing in North Carolina and a lot of building stock that reflects that is available for reuse. And that state tax credit was 30 to 40%. On the, for 30 to 40 cents on the dollar on the state credit side. So combining that with the federal, it's a very attractive project possibility for a lot of people. Well, that went away unexpectedly. It was resurrected by the legislature, which we have had calls from many, many people. Is this for real? Is this really happening? And the answer is yes, we think it is. So we're welcoming a lot of investors back from out of state, actually, who are very interested in taking advantage of what is a very strong incentive for reuse of historic places. So again, that's industrial buildings, utility buildings, agricultural buildings. And I haven't checked before this meeting, but in the past, that was probably the most generous state tax credit program in the state for that targeted use. We're actually at $3.4 billion with a B in terms of private investment in historic buildings in North Carolina. And so on the federal side, we are 8th in the nation in completed projects and 6th in proposed projects. In other words, ones that are in the pipeline for FY 2021, which is really exciting. And again, I think that tells you just how robust our private investment in these historic buildings, that very successful public-private partnership is working out. COVID set us back a little bit with some of our public interactions in large groups. Our staff has continued to make site visits, but very limited, usually outdoors, small numbers of people. But we are really hopeful that, and I think it's going to happen, we have had 2 building showcases in Elizabeth City and in Tarboro. And now Ahoskie would like to get in on this as well. And so the format for this, as you might recall, is we are working with individual communities to help them focus and highlight some buildings that might be of interest to others, with willing owners who would like either investment or either to sell those buildings, and that are also eligible for rehabilitation with the state and federal tax credits. This is as much of an advertisement and a request for all of you to help us gather in more possibilities. Our Certified Local Government Grant Program is currently active. Approximately 50 communities, including Mayor Newell's community in Lexington, are eligible to apply for these grants. And we normally have somewhere in the range of $120,000 to $150,000. That's 10% of our federal funding that we are required by law to return to our local governments. And so these really are funding what I call seed projects. And these are anything from new National Register nominations, architectural or archaeological surveys, bricks and mortar money, which our colleague Michelle Lanier knows how important that National Park Service money can be for her needs, her particular community's needs, and then educational and outreach projects. And we've done a very successful one in Edenton, Mr. Dixon's probably familiar with, that focused on Cadish Church, for example. So I really want you to, all of you, hear of anybody who's interested in these kinds of projects, please do send them our way. I know Mr. Ruffin has sent constituents our way because he knows about our program. So all of you are sort of ambassadors of our service programs as well. The applications are due April 22nd. So it's not quite tax time, but almost. So time is drawing near. We'd really like to spread this money around as much as possible. And one thing just to think about, if there is an African-American cemetery, municipally owned, it has to be typically publicly owned, or the cemeteries are tricky because of ownership being sometimes less than obvious because of the nature of what it is. But we have been working usually each year now with at least one community on a ground penetrating radar study of the cemeteries to help, especially if there's unmarked graves or the boundaries are not known. And we'd really like to continue to do that at least once a year, maybe more than once a year with communities. Those local governments continue to come forward who want to be eligible for these for this designation and therefore the grants. Alexander County, which for the longest time was a very quiet county, it had the fewest National Register nominations of any county. They have had a new emphasis on historic preservation. Alexander County is seeking that status. We hope to hear from them, that is them at the Park Service, very quickly and soon on that, so they can get into the mix as well. We also are working with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which is the leading organization to help foster local historic preservation activities. And they're really a coalition of those individual communities. They have developed a disaster resiliency training curriculum. That training opportunity is being offered to our agency at no cost as a result of some of the congressional appropriations that were received to help with recovery from Hurricanes Florence and Michael, as well as some of the earlier ones. So our training is scheduled over 2 days, 2 different weeks, in the morning So there's 2 mornings. If you'd like to learn more about disaster resiliency, disaster preparedness through the lens of historic preservation, we would be very, very glad to offer an invitation to you. It will be done as a virtual, so you don't even have to go anywhere, but you can join everyone through this opportunity. We're also really excited. We're going to be going to Norfolk in May. Several of us, it's kind of a joint effort between State Historic Sites colleagues, the Office of State Archaeology. I'll be presenting as well. We put forward a proposal to do a presentation about how we have used what's called wave attenuators at Brunswick Town Fort Anderson State Historic Site. This is really combining environmentally friendly technology along with the need for erosion prevention, which we have seen happen. I can't tell you all in the time we have allotted. I could tell you a lot about Brunswick Town Fort Anderson. It is an extraordinarily rich place in terms of all of the different eras of history from indigenous all the way up through the Civil War. And even today, I guess wave attenuators are historic in a way as well. And so this is really a pilot project. I think it's a model project, a template project for many other states to look at, because the issue of water where it doesn't belong is one that I think as an agency, we're sadly have too much experience dealing with. But again, this is something that I think will help keep that place going for a long, long time to come. Our Survey and National Register branch also is extraordinarily busy. We have 7 county surveys going on right now, which probably is a record for what we're doing simultaneously. And that is being funded by that special, again, congressional appropriation that we've talked about before. We've also, talking about data and statistics, we've actually started to look at what counties are providing the most constituent demand. And we have now actually reoriented some of our county service territories because we recognize there are parts of the state where there's more need for our services, more demand for those services. So we are adapting to that as well. Hurricane grants, the sub-grants are moving forward. A big internal project is ongoing. We're going to have one at Charlotte Hawkins Brown, actually. We're also working on the mast of the battleship USS North Carolina. So a lot of money to be spent, a lot of money to be invested in these irreplaceable historic places. A lot of demand because of infrastructure for our review programs. We've actually seen the last 5 years a 40% increase in project submissions needing review. And again, what we're always trying to do is balance the need for progress, the need for modernity, with trying to preserve that is irreplaceable and that which helps us understand who we are as North Carolinians now and in the future. Several new publications, I'll leave those to you in the report. Really excited about Sally Stockard, one of the first female graduates, actually the first female graduate at the University of North Carolina. The Highway Marker Program, we're really excited, has gotten money again. And it's not going to be one of these hopeful things in the future. The legislature, very grateful to them that this is a permanent thing. The Department of Transportation must provide it, and it is $100,000. Right now we have maintenance needs to catch up on, but we're looking forward to getting going with a lot of public requests for a lot of places. Flyleaf continues. Dr. Waters starred in that not too long ago. I was very happy about that. And the last thing that I'll report is this is sort of a historic date for me. This is the day in 2011 that I came with great hope and came for my interview. I had a terrible case of bronchitis. I still don't know how Jeff Crow decided that I needed to be that person because he could hardly understand me. I was so hoarse, but that is still a red letter day in my personal history. And I'm glad I am for having come to Raleigh that day. So thank you all very much. That's my report. I'm glad to answer any questions.
So we're glad it all happened.
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Denard. Director Bartos, who of course is the director of the department's historical resources. The gentleman you referred to texted me today, even unbeknownst to him that we would be seeing each other visually, about what a wonderful resource Ramona Bartos is. So, again, it's important to note from the public's point of view that These ladies and gentlemen serve not just internal issues within the department and the sphere of their interest, but also serving constituents that do come to the experts, and she clearly is an expert. There's another piece that she mentioned that I think is worth a comment from my perspective, and that is she talked about tax credits and the reinstatement of tax credits here and there. I speak to these things sometime in my trade groups. We had the Tax Reform Act of 2017 that in arguably a very prosperous 2018 year, Barron's estimates $68 billion less in charitable donations were made in that tax year, largely because of the de-incentivization of charitable giving through the doubling of the standard deduction. Nothing is probably unfortunately greater than in characterizing human behavior in the United States than the U.S. tax code. And we may not be as altruistic as we think we are, and like to hope we are, but the truth be known is this is top line revenue for all nonprofits of all stripes, whether it be religious organizations, YMCA, small universities and colleges, and all the things we've talked about in today's agenda relative to looking to public support. And again, we have to be sensitive to that. So I'm appreciative that you did refer to that. I realize the standard deduction is not exactly a tax credit issue, but it's first cousin to it. So again, great report, Ramona, as always. Any other questions of Ramona Bartos? Well, I would like to close the meeting today, and it's kind of an eclectic catch-all call, Chairman's announcements. The only real announcement probably is reminder of the June 22nd next quarterly meeting of the Historical Commission. I presume that it still would be a virtual. Dr. Waters, I know of no plans at this point that we would come back in person, although I think most of us look forward to that day still. But I also would like to, and also speaking of the speaking circuit, I've actually been in 19 states since Labor Day. And Michelle Lanier made some remark a moment ago that triggered a comment in my mind about how special North Carolina is in terms of people from out of state coming. I don't hardly ever mention that I'm from North Carolina, that I don't see a subtle smile on people's faces. There's something special about this state. And obviously the demographics are proving it. People are pouring in to North Carolina from all over the United States right now. But also the beauty of it and the history of it is got a unique combination that we should all be very, very proud of. But as you've heard me say in this meeting today, and also many times before, how much I've given shout outs to the staff, to their excellent work, to the excellent reports they give us and to the public. I'd like to give a shout out to the commissioners themselves. And where that came from, frankly, was a conversation I had yesterday with Commissioner Bryan. And that is the amount of work that's done without a lot of fanfare, a lot of recognition by even commissioners. While I hope the public realizes we are technically political appointees, we all of us understand the division between historical perspective and the so-called red hot politics of the moment. And in our own way, and I look over this Zoom presentation, obviously Commissioner Johnson with her deep involvement with the African American Historical Commission. You've got Dr. Denard, who constantly comments about things that are very pertinent to history and very, very active in his regard. Susan Phillips, who I just realized we share something in common, collection of political memorabilia all the way back to before I was born. And I might add, it's in a bipartisan way. It's not just tilted one way or the other. I can't obviously Mayor Clark is practicing future history every day by presiding over one of the great cities of our state. Sam Dixon, my goodness, the first trip I ever made as chair, within a week of taking the chair, I went to Edenton, and that's a special place for me, obviously, because I grew up in a Hosky, as you know, and I'm glad, Ramona, there's something says a pulse over in a Hosky about things historical, because Edenton kind of sucks all the air up there in that regard. But nothing is no better commissioner than Commissioner Dixon around his deep involvement in so many things that don't even come necessarily to the level of the commission. Commissioner Snowden, who just had to leave to go to another meeting, surprised today she didn't have to recuse herself. She's usually involved in so many things up in the northeastern part of the state that often technically requires her to recuse herself for a conflict of interest. Obviously, the new commissioners, Groom and let's see if Ms. Condell are on. I'm deeply trusting that you're as involved as others. And as I get to know you more, I can certainly cite that, I'm certain. But I wanted to say that because it's not just a staff thing. It's really the commission that you see in these presentations. I'm speaking, of course, to the broader state audience that have a passion for history, enjoy our involvement in it, our awareness of it, and again, have the respect for what I call the perspective of history, which frankly does take us back. And Commissioner Bryan said this to me yesterday. She said, it's always important to focus on the facts. That's the friend that history is to us. It gives us more perspective. There's a reason why some even memorials throughout the country are not even considered for 50 years until there's a perspective allowed for people prospectively memorialized. But I did want to take this opportunity to thank my fellow commissioners for the work they're doing, because they're not just sitting here as political appointees. And I hope you understand that, and I hope that's not seen as too much of a self-serving comment about the commissions. But anyway, are there any other comments or thoughts or issues that before we entertain adjournment? Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
Well, first of all, thank you for that acknowledgement. We do appreciate it. And I can say that I've enjoyed working collegially with my colleagues on the commission to just do the business of keeping history in the forefront. And on that note, I just wanted to give just a brief little shout out to an event that occurred at the earlier part of this month that shows cross-departmental collaboration. And that was NC Opera did the world premiere of Sanctuary Road, which is an American opera based on the writings of William Still, who was an Underground Railroad conductor. Mm-hmm. What was wonderful about that is an opportunity to lift up history in a way that's connected to the arts. And Shaw University was a part of that effort. And we had HBCU night on Saturday night. And what was really great was the cooperation from our colleagues in the North Carolina History Museum, Earl Imes, who did 2 panel presentations leading up to Sanctuary Road. He talked about Underground Railroad on a Zoom event, and he did so with Angela Thorpe, who is the director of our North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. So it's that kind of collaboration that puts this kind of work out in public. And we had a gala event. It was so much fun. And it's an accessible opera. William Curry, who was the conductor at the Durham Symphony, he was part of a panel after talk discussion with the composer Paul Moravec. And it was just really fantastic. Our secretary came out. There were a lot of folks from across the Division of Natural and Cultural Resources that participated. And that's the kind of thing that I get excited about and wanted to lift out. And the fact that we had an HBCU involved was amazing. And I know Dr. Waters, you attended. Didn't you have a good time? We had a step and repeat and a cupcake reception. But that's the kind of energy we can have around history. And I just wanted to lift that up and to also thank Ken Howard for supporting his staff in participating in these kinds of events and activities.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, before we leave, if I could just say a couple of things too, and just thank you, Dr. Johnson, for mentioning that, and also for mentioning, Ken and his staff and the involvement that they had in that, Ken for encouraging them to be involved. And I wanted to say that the secretary and I kind of in a debate with each other about who has the best job. So I still think it's me. But if he were here, he'd be shaking his head no. But as you can see, I'm enjoying every minute that I spend with this team and just getting to know the department. I've had an opportunity to travel. I've had a great visit with Commissioner Kondo out at Cherokee, and I want to thank her for the time that she gave for us to sit down and have a great conversation with each other. I've had time with Commissioner Groom. I look forward to going up to Currituck County in April to spend a day and an evening with Commissioner Snowden. And I will be coming out to Edenton soon, Sam. So Commissioner Dixon, I look forward to getting out there. This kind of back problem kind of slowed everything down. But I want to thank this team, and I want to thank the team behind the team that you see here, because there's tremendous work that goes on behind them too. And these directors, I think, create an environment that makes it possible for their team members to do that work. Things that were not mentioned here is Sarah taking the time to actually talk with constituents out in Buncombe County with the Register of Deeds out there to talk about ways that we can make more resources available to communities that they can do genealogical research. We talked about cohabitation records. Ken did not mention that he and his staff have been able to find money, additional money for internships and they're working with historically Black colleges and universities to kind of fill that. He did not say anything, but Ken, I want to make a point of addressing that, and thank you for doing that. Michelle in her division is really encouraging her staff to do some great things. Chuck LeCount and Charles, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to engage with Chuck, but Chuck is a tremendous resource there in historic sites, as is some of the site managers and assistant site managers. One of whom is a student of mine who has done some tremendous things over at Charlotte Hawkins, a former student of mine over at Charlotte Hawkins Brown, and also Ramona's team. When we need information, just recently needed information to be sent to an elected official in another part of the state. He had some questions about some things. I was able to reach out to Joe Beatty, and quickly he put together the information that was needed. So I wanted to mention those names as well, and to thank these directors for making it possible for those staff members to do that work. So just thank you for giving me those few moments. And for those of you in the West, Commissioner Kondo and Commissioner Groom, as you know, if you want to hear more from Michelle Lanier, she will be on the radio out there on Friday. We did an interview. I had an opportunity to do an interview with her, with my former colleague, and it will broadcast on the public radio station, and she will be talking about state historic sites. So thank you all for what you do to support the staff here at the department. So thank you to this team.
Thank you, Dr. Waters, and get well.
Yes.
That's a command. So do I hear any other comments, or I certainly will the chair will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Prior to adjourning, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say to all of my commission members and the folk who make reports, I don't intend to cause any unnecessary trouble, but some good trouble, because you all prepare all of these good reports, and I'm not so sure, that we can't continue to go higher and higher and higher. And I'm just so excited about, being on this committee. And I'll share with you all one thing. I don't want to steal Dr. Waters' thunder, I saw the report that he was kind of under the weather. And I too was under the weather in emergency care most of this weekend and was released on Monday. And I thought, I said, I want to come to this meeting and all of this, but this is such exciting work that I really can't, stay away. So, it's always an inspiration to hear the reports that are given and to know that all of this meticulous work went into them, and I have to read them and I have to respond to them. And so it's my way of saying that I appreciate what you all are doing, and I'm excited to be a part of this team as well.
Dr. Denard, I've always, let me say it this way, I've always perceived your even occasional pointed comments or criticism as highly aspirational. which is the positive side of a criticism, hopefully. But anyway, I thank you, and I hope you also are recovering. So our thoughts are with you, of course. Any other comments? Again, I will entertain a motion for adjournment at this point.
So Susan Phillips, I move to adjourn.
Commissioner Phillips has moved to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it, David.
Dr. Denard or Ms. Groom, one of the two, but I think I heard Dr. Denard first. So in the motion to adjourn, then call the last roll of the meeting. Dr. Bryan.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Condell.
Yes.
Dr. Denard.
Yes.
Commissioner Dixon.
Yes.
Commissioner Groom. Commissioner Groom is, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
And Commissioner Snowden has had to leave the meeting, and David Ruffin, yes. And one of the things I look forward to most getting together is not all these endless roll calls.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope everyone is enjoying the first indication of spring. I know I am, even though we're in a little bit of an overcast day today. It's just been wonderful this time of year. I love because, it's getting better. So again, thank you for all the work, all the staff contributions, and all the commissioners' contribution to this serious charge. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
Bye.
y'all.
Take care.